everybody, and welcome to episode 7 of my Learn in 30 series. Today we're going to talk about turn. Now, every single dance that you do in Ballroom Latin has an element of turn in it. Nothing is dead straight in forward or backwards or even just sideways. So we've always got an element of turn as we go around the floor or as we do a routine like in cha-cha, jive or rumba that pretty static, but it's obviously going to turn around on the spot in which you're dancing. So it's important to understand the different types of turn, how we can apply it, and basically what it is. So we'll start with the easy turns first. And what I mean by easy is that you're doing them on your own, solo, that doesn't necessarily impact on your partner. Now, these are in the Latin dances, because whenever you do any kind of turn in ballroom, of course, you're going to impact on your partner because you're physically holding on to them. So in the Latin dances, you will, of course, be stood on your own on a number of occasions, and you may well do a turn. And to start with, there are only 3 types of turn that you can do on your own in Latin. And you've got a 3-step turn, a spot turn or turn under the arm, and a switch turn. There are, of course, other figures that turn as you move, but I'll address those separately in a moment. So to start with, the first one, the 3-step turn, it pretty much does exactly what it says on the tin. It's a turn with 3 steps. Now, a 3-step turn can turn all the way around, so you can do a whole turn. So I can do that towards the camera now. So I can go forward, turn, and I can step forward again. So it can have a whole turn, or depending on what you're doing choreographically, a 3-step turn can turn just a half, so you turn 180 degrees, or it can even turn less, of course. There will be times when you might have a spin, which goes all the way around, maybe twice. So there's 4 turns. I said there was 3, there's 4. So you may well have a spin, but to be honest, in basic figures, because these essentially, these little lectures are based around basic figures rather than more advanced actions. You wouldn't really have that in any kind of basic scenario, or even up to gold level. You wouldn't have any spins on the spot until you get into advanced stuff. So perhaps I was right the first time with 3, but we'll stick with 4. Anyway, so a spin on the spot, so that's just turning on the ball of your foot. Now you can do a whole turn, half turn, 25 turns, however many you want to do, however many you can keep doing without falling over. I nearly did then. So that's a spin. Let's forget that one for the moment, because it's unlikely you're going to be doing that one at the moment in your dancing necessarily. So a 3-step turn has 3 steps. The second step is a close. So you'll take a step in a given direction on a given foot. So I'm going to go forward on the left. My right foot then closes to the left. What happens is it's the lower half of my body that's making this happen. I'm closing my right hip to my left hip, and that allows me to turn around and then step out into whatever it is I'm going to do. What you don't want to do, which is I was a little bit guilty of then because I'm talking to the camera, is allowing your upper body to determine what you're going to do with a 3-step turn. If you let your upper body do it too much, you're going to fall off balance. I use this phrase a lot. You want activity downstairs, not upstairs. Sometimes you want activity upstairs and not downstairs. I'll come to that a bit later. But when we're doing a 3-step turn, I'm working on my actions downstairs. So I'm working on my legs and my feet and my hips. I close my right hip and my right leg to my left leg, and it allows me to spin forward to the left here. You could, of course, do that on the right foot. You go forward on the right, closing the left to the right, and then you step out. That's a 3-step turn. 3 steps, doesn't have to turn all the way around, can do, doesn't have to, can turn a half, can turn a quarter, could turn 3/4, as much as you want. Important though, on a 3-step turn, that you close your feet in the middle. Sometimes when you're doing a 3-step turn, you might not, so you could do something like this, 1, 2, 3. That is not, in a sense, a pure 3-step turn. You want to close your feet. It's a ball lead as well, ball flat lead as you come out of that, unless of course you're doing paso doble, which of course you will then do a heel lead. If you do more than one 3-step turn, again, you're probably unlikely to do this in basic figures, it's more advanced, you would only have 2 steps in the 3-step turns until the last one. So you'd have 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So I did 2 then, 2 consecutive turns. The first one had 2 steps, the second one had 3 steps. So when you finish, you'll have the 3rd step. But in a sense, if you're just doing 1, 3 steps. Right, moving on. You've got a switch turn. Now, this is something that ladies predominantly have, often in basic figures. So if I use a rumba action for a moment, so let's say, for instance, you've done a open hip twist and you've turned like that. So that would be, we class that as an element of a switch turn. So you've switched from one direction to another, but a pure switch turn is when you would come out of this into the fan position. You then step forward on the right foot, your feet are in place, you then turn like that and you switch very quickly to face the opposite direction. So there's a switch turn, then you would step back into fan. So that's a switch turn. So essentially a switch turn is when your feet are placed and you switch from one direction to the other. So that's switching from one side to the other. Switch turn. Again, all of that is done downstairs. I feel it's the hips that are turning. So in this instance here, I'm still on my right foot. I'm going to pull my left hip back to allow me to then step back on that left foot once I've done the switch. All downstairs, not upstairs. Don't use the upper body to do it because it'll spin you past your foot and then you'll have trouble balancing. The other turn that you've got is a spot turn or underarm turn. You'd use the same technique when you do this. As a lady dancer or a follower, you would turn under the arm. It's unlikely that a leader or a male dancer would do an underarm turn. Typically, it's the lady that does that. The man would turn her. But both roles can do a spot turn. But the technique's the same. The idea of it's the same. Whichever dance you're doing this in, it's going to be the same as well. So you'd have this in pretty much all of the dances. I've just had a thought actually. You would have a spin action essentially in a American spin in jive. That's a basic figure. So figures with what I said earlier. Turn on the ball of foot anyway when you do a spin. There we go. Just to turn on the ball of foot. And again, it's using the lower half to make it happen. Anyway, back to the underarm turn. So 3 steps again in an underarm turn. So if I'm going to turn to the right here, underarm or spot turn, you step across yourself. It's important to step across yourself. Don't overdo it with your upper body because again, you don't want to turn the upstairs too much. Step across yourself and then I feel like I untwist my legs and my hips, transfer weight onto that right foot and then step to the side. So there's my 3 steps. Same thing applies if I do it the other way as well. I step across myself, try not to turn my upper body too much, stand on that right foot, untwist my legs to the left. My left hip is starting this action for me. I finish on my right, well, I'm still on the right foot, transfer weight to left, and then I'm to the side. Okay, so again, 3 steps. So you've got 1, pull the hip back, stand on that right foot, 2, and then finish to the side, 3, and the same difference when you're moving the other way. 3 steps, using the lower half of your body to do it rather than the upper body. Now, these actions that you do on your own, really, it's up to you to get it right on your own, really. When you're not touching anyone, you can't be influenced or helped. So it's important that you do it correctly and use the correct part of your body. Otherwise, you're going to try and reach out and grab and hold on to your partner to keep you in balance. When you're with a partner, there are certain amounts of compromise that we have to make to allow turns to happen. But before I do that, just going to go back about the turns or turning when you're doing a particular figure. This is very easy. We do it when we walk and we do it subconsciously without even realizing it. So if we're walking along a street or road or whatever and we want to go somewhere, we just go there. We just look and we go there. Even if we're not looking, we can still turn and go in a certain direction. We can do that kind of naturally. So if someone was to say to you, I need you to do a back basic, James, into some lock steps forward that go to your left, well, you would just do that, wouldn't you? You would just go to your left because you have an idea of where you're going to finish and the journey that you're going to take to get there. That shouldn't be too difficult. So again, when you're dancing solo, that sort of turn shouldn't be too difficult. You're going to start here, you're going to finish there, and in the middle of that, you're going to do some lock steps. So make sure you finish there. There you go. I'm done. Easy. So that's pretty much, just as long as you know your direction, those figures should be quite easy. No one else is going to influence you, so it should be easy. Now, when you're dancing it with a person, when you're attached, you have to, what I said before, make some compromises. And so this is just a general thing through turns. when you're moving as a partnership, one of you is on the inside and then one of you is also on the outside. And depending on who's going forwards will determine, or who's going backwards, determines who's on the inside or who's on the outside. The person moving backwards is always on the inside and the person moving forwards is always on the outside of the turn. So we're going around the person or the person is going around us, depending on which way we're turning. This is, of course, most apparent in the ballroom dances because not only do we have turns almost every other step, but we're also very much closer to each other. So we're much more aware of those turns in our bodies. In the Latin dances, you have a bit more space between you. So we have when we're in a closed hold with the arms, we've still got space between us. We don't actually have body contact. Very, very seldom do you have body contact in any of the Latin figures. It does happen, but not very often. And when you're slightly further away, it makes things a little harder because the center of your turn is going to be slightly skewed because you're further away from each other, which means you've got to travel a bit further if you're on the outside. However, the good thing is that the turns you have in Latin aren't as significant as they would be in ballroom. So for instance, a bit of cha-cha basic or a bit of rumba basic at the beginning only turns an eighth over the first 3 steps. And then it turns another eighth over the next 3 steps. So the amount of turn is quite gradual. So it's not something that's particularly obvious that you have to compensate for. So it's not as obvious as, say, for instance, a natural turning waltz, which I'll cover in a second, which has a lot more turn more quickly over the 3 steps. So that eighth of a turn really is just minimal. You don't really notice it so much. But it's good to be aware. It's good to understand that when you're moving forwards, you're going around the outside. And then when you're going backwards, you are on the inside, moving out of the way of your partner, essentially. Essentially, because of the open nature of Latin American, the turn factors when you're dancing with a person are easier and not so intricate as they would be in the ballroom. Basically, you've just got to make sure that, providing you're doing the right figures, I mean, there are some figures where this doesn't apply, but you're just going to make sure that you stay facing your partner when you're in hold, because if you then skew off each other, it's not going to work. So the way in which you hold yourself, whether you're dancing as a leader or as a follower, male or female, you just make sure the arms are relatively firm and not fixed as such, but firm so that you can deal with whatever's in front of you and you can follow them. The turns are very little, as I said, there's very small amounts of turn generally when you're in hold like that. So it's not something that's going to be particularly obvious and something that you've got to work too hard about. It's just remembering that you've got to make allowances for each other a little bit. Where we do have to make significant allowances is in the ballroom. So we'll talk a bit more about that now and go into a bit more detail because it's a fundamental movement that we have to understand to make our ballroom dancing move effortlessly and seamlessly together. So in the ballroom, we've got a couple of different types of turn to think about. We've got body turn. So we've got turn of the body. And that is called CBM, contra body movement. And that means one side of your body is turning towards the foot that's moving, either forward or backwards, okay? So that's all it is. And essentially what that is an indicator. Like in your car, you pop the indicator on to let the person you're dancing with know which way you're going to turn. Normally, the indication comes from the person moving forwards or the leader. I think, to be honest, at a lower level, when you're first beginning to understand this, it's generally a good idea for the person who is the leader to do these things. Honestly, it doesn't matter. This is a separate thing altogether. As a teacher, I don't mind who leads. I'm not worried in the slightest if it's the man or the woman. The thing that makes the leader or the follower, the leader or the follower, whoever's in charge, I don't mind. One of you, as long as one of you is in charge, it doesn't matter. If you're both trying to be in charge, that's difficult. Essentially, the man generally has the lady encapsulated within his arms. So that's where the leading comes from in our respect. So why the men typically lead. Normally as well, the men are bigger than the lady and stronger. So it's easier for us to be more dominant and the lady to be more passive. However, that's not always the case. And as I said before, I don't mind who leads as long as one of you does and leads the right thing. But again, that doesn't really matter. As long as one of you leads something and the other person follows it, it doesn't really matter if it was right or wrong, because if you both do the same thing wrong, it's right. that's, you know, that's a slightly, that's a bit fuzzy, that. There obviously is a lot more to it than that. But generally speaking, in a social dance environment, as long as you're going the correct way around the floor, I don't mind what you do, really, as long as you're both doing the same thing. If one of you is doing a jive and the other one's doing a foxtrot, that's tricky. But anyway, so the idea is that one of you is going to lead. So the body turn generally is led from the leader and the person going forwards, because one of the other reasons that's important is because they can see where they're going. Of course, oh yeah, I'm going to have to go that way, I can see. When you're going backwards, you can't unless you've got those reversing cameras. We need to perhaps invent those for dancers. So ladies to have reversing cameras, perhaps a little screen attached to the elbow. They can have a look at, oh yeah, it's all clear, let's go. That might be interesting, mightn't it? Something to think about. So we've got body turn, and that's CBM. And it's the movement of the body towards the foot that's moving forward or backwards. We've also got foot turn. So just a turn of the foot. So the feet can turn past the body into a given direction. And I'll give you an example of that in a moment. Okay, so that's just when the feet turn and the body doesn't change. We've also got times where we have what we call a pointing alignment. So the feeling is that the feet move on and turn into a different place, but the body doesn't. And this is happening all the time for the person that's moving backwards into a turn. There are some very few exceptions. So for the sake of this video, you may as well just presume that's always happening when you step backwards. So let's put this into context. And let's look at a natural turn in waltz. 6 steps. Whoever's going forward is going to do the same thing. It doesn't matter. So whether you're leading or following, male or female, the steps are the same. You're just doing them at different times. And the backward steps, again, are the same for both parties. It's just when you do them. Okay, so if we go forward first. So when you step forward, you're going to lead with your right foot into a natural turn. So a natural turn is a right turn, and it leads with the right foot when you're starting it forwards. So you have a right turn, my right foot goes forward, my body turns towards that, so my body's going to turn as that foot goes forward, and then my left leg follows that turn of the body. I swivel a bit on that right foot to produce the turn, and then I close my feet, and that's those 3 steps done. So that is either the 1, 2, 3 for the man, or the 4, 5, 6 for the lady. Now, when you're moving backwards, it's exactly the same for both, as I said. So your left leg will go backwards, your body will turn towards it. So my right side is now turning towards my left foot. That's the CBM. So there's the little indicator that I'm going to turn that way. Now, when you're moving backwards, you've got a little bit extra to consider here. You are on the inside of the turn. So you've got to essentially get out of your partner's way so that the person coming forward can go past you. They are doing more turn, essentially, and you are doing less turn. However, as a couple, the amount of turn you do, the measurement of the turn is still the same. You're still turning 3/8 of a turn, but the feeling is, of course, you're not doing as much because you're on the inside and you're already there, you see, you're already nearly in position. So CBM's in, I get the left foot back, I'm preparing myself because I take this foot now to the inside of the turn. So whenever you're doing a turn, you've got to have a little, this is in ballroom particularly, so you've always got to have a little visual in your head of where the centre of your turn is. Now the centre of your turn is not on your foot because that would produce a spin. And we don't want to do that, of course. We want a turn that moves across the floor because our steps are step side close. So whenever I do a natural turn, I imagine my centre of the turn is over there somewhere. And that's the idea. I'm going to put my centre of my turn over there. And so if you put your arm out, this is a great little exercise actually. If you're going forward, put your arm out. Imagine you've got a pole in the ground, a nice long walking stick or something. Put it in the ground, tent pole. There you go. Set forward and you're going to go around that point as you do your natural turn. That centre doesn't change. That centre doesn't change. You turn around that centre. Okay. Of course, if you're holding on to it, your arm might move it. Your arm's going to bend and stuff, but that fixed point doesn't change. So we go around that, and our turn going forwards is quite gradual. We're turning over all 3 of the steps. When you go backwards, that centre's the same. So as a couple, your centre of turn is going to be in the same place. So it's over here, I'm holding on to that same pole. Now what I do though is that when I go this way, back on that left foot, I take my left foot a little bit towards it. Rather than going dead straight back, I'm mindful of the job that my partner's got to do and how they've got to get around me. So I take my left foot towards that center of the turn to just prepare myself. And while I'm doing that, I'm still doing the CBM as well. So my body's turning towards that foot behind me. And then I do what's called a pointing alignment. I point my foot where it's going to finish. My body hasn't done anything extra. Nothing extra there with my body. My foot has turned on. So my foot is now pointing in a different position to my body. And so this is monitoring my partner, because when you go backwards, you do all of your turn between your feet between the first and second steps. It's done there, it's done. So now, but your partner's gradually coming around, you see, so you've got to monitor them. You can't allow your body to turn too early. So you prepare yourself, you get to the center, you get out of the partner's way, and then your body monitors where they're going, and then you end up finishing together at your final destination. If you were to do all of the turn with your body, immediately you would leave your partner behind and you'd skew off each other. If you were to gradually turn in the same amount as your partner, they wouldn't get round you. They wouldn't get round you because your body would be in the way. So we have to monitor this, and we have to stay with them, stay with them, stay with them, and then we finish together at our final place. So that's important to bear in mind. So when you're on the inside of the turn, you get out of your partner's way with your feet, but you leave your body with them so that they can dance around you. Okay? But if you do all of your turn at once, you lose them. And if you don't get out of their way to start with, then it's an almighty job for them to get round you. This is a particular issue with lady dancers that first learn to dance, because they are expecting to be led. Now, I did say before about leading someone, and it's important that one of you leads. However, and as I said this about the Latin, you've got to know where you've got to go. You've got to know your direction. And so you don't want to be an obstacle, an immovable object. You don't want to be one of those. So you just need to be mindful that when you're going backwards, you've got to get out of your partner's way and then allow them to dance past you. And then you'll arrive together. Same thing applies with a reverse turn. So when you're turning to the left, the only difference, of course, is you start on the other foot. But the principle is exactly the same. So when you're on the inside, you get out of the way and then monitor your partner's body to stay with them. Now that's whoever it is, man or lady, going forward or backwards. So you've always got to be mindful of these things and monitor your body positions. So that principle is applicable whenever you turn in any of the dances, whether you close your feet or not. Now, some figures turn more gradually over a number of steps, but the principle is still the same. Sometimes you might have an element where you start turning a natural weave in foxtrot, for example. So you turn into that. So you have that same principle where you're going around the outside of your partner's feet will point where they're going to finish, and then they allow you to dance around them. And then you've got some steps where you're not turning. So you just hold the body position. You've got an outside partner position there as well to consider, which is another topic for another day. But you're just going to be straight, and then you'll apply the turn principles at the end when you have to turn. Now, I did mention earlier about the turns where you just turn your feet. Now, you've got an element of that with the inside of turn when you point. So I feel like my foot points to where it's going to go, but it hasn't really turned on the spot. Now, there are a few occasions where you have this, and the most obvious one is for the lady in a feather finish. Now, what she does a heel turn in the foxtrot, quick, there's the first three steps, and then coming out of that, she goes forward on the left foot, she steps to the right, like that, she's on the outside. Now, what happens here is that the body then doesn't do anything else. The body stays where it is, but because you're then going to go off on a diagonal, and the man is going to step outside the lady's feet, if you were to turn everything like this, the body and the foot, and line it up, you'd end up side by side, or you'd pull the man over a little bit. So when you come forward out of that, so you've done your heel turn, you come forward, you swing your leg to the right, then your right foot turns on to where it's going to finish, and then you can step backwards beautifully outside. Well, the man can step outside of your feet, and your bodies stay together. So that then helps you to produce a CBMP position, outside partner, you see. So that's the turn of the foot only. And you'll have these sort of things as well, when you're moving from promenade to a closed position as well. So for instance, especially this is particularly for the lady, so you've done a whisk, let's say you're in promenade position as you move out, you go forward like this, now your right foot steps to the side, your body turns a little bit, not a great deal, but your foot has to turn on further because you're now going to be outside partner after that. And if your body and your foot was to turn the same amount, then again, it'd be the same principle as the feather finish there. You'd end up side by side, or you'd pull your man over. So when you're going from a closed position to an outside partner position, and you're moving backwards, you need to ensure that you turn your foot. And when you're going from a promenade position to a closed position, which will then be followed by an outside partner position, it sounds very complicated, again, you're going to turn your foot. So these things you need to identify in your routines, and with the help of your teachers or your partners, then your partner perhaps, some of you might have more than one partner, you then will need to identify where these particular actions are to make it easier. And if things aren't going quite well or aren't going to plan, that could well be what's happening. It could be that your body and your foot are turning the same amount, in which case you're turning and pulling your partner off their balance, or you're not doing it at all and doing nothing at all, and then it doesn't help either, does it? So that's something to be mindful of. Now finally, I want to just mention one last turn that I haven't discussed yet, and that's the spin turn in waltz. You have pivots or spins in other dances as well. However, it's most synonymous with the waltz and of course the quick step, because you have the same spin turn figure in both of those dances. Now this is slightly different in that when I talked earlier about the natural turn in waltz, I feel that my center of my turn is over to my right or to my left, whichever way I'm turning, left or right. I feel my center is away from me and I'm turning around a fixed point somewhere off to the side. Now when you do a pivot, the center is the pivoting foot, and you can only pivot backwards. So when I go backwards here, I'm on the inside. Now my pivot center is going to be my left foot. This is a natural spin turn. So I've done the first 3 steps of a spin turn. I'm now going to do the pivoting bit. So I place my left foot to the inside of the turn. I've moved it that way slightly to make it slightly easier. This is now the center. We're turning around that point. So my partner's coming round with me. So this is slightly different in that I don't move my other foot. I don't take that away, because if I did that, I'd lose my partner because I'm spinning around my left foot. So the foot goes to the inside there. I feel like it's underneath my left elbow and slightly behind me as well. I pivot around that, it's fixed. The right leg is fixed as well. I hold that in position as I pivot. Everything goes together, but I still feel my body slightly underturned. It's not gone past my right foot at this point. This position of the leg like this helps me to maintain contact with my partner, so I know where she is. And the lady will also have a little bit of a connection through the leg to keep them there. Especially when you're first learning this, it's important to get a connection through the thighs here, just above the knee, so that you can monitor each other. If that leg moves away, then the center of that turn's gone, because as I go backwards here, I'm turning around this point, I've also got a connection point through my right leg with my lady's right leg too. So that helps us to stay together. You can only have a pivot, as I say, when you move backwards. So it's a fixed point. I'm turning around my left foot here and my right foot's held in position. When you come forwards, you'll go forward, you get that connection to the thigh here slightly with your partner. You turn around this foot and leave your other leg behind you. So that's called a pivoting action. It's not a pure pivot, because as I said, you can only do a pivot moving backwards. So the lady has her CBM as she comes forward. Her body will turn towards this moving leg. They'll connect through here, but as they turn, that other leg is held in position. That leg stays behind them. It's very important that you do that. So you do feel like you spin. You go on a heel lead here. You feel like you turn around the right foot. The left foot draws a lovely little semicircle behind you on the tip of that toe. When you get here, this is when it gets a little bit trickier. You push from your right leg. The left leg goes behind you, and then you do have an element of a spin of your own around the left ball of foot. So that's what happens for you. You have a little bit of a spinny action there. A spinny action, that's a technical term, spinny action. Write that down. So there's your little spin at the end as such. And And you go right up on your toes and you turn around your left foot and your right leg comes in, you brush beautifully, and then you'll collect your weight out of that, generally turning 3/8 of a turn as you come out of that. Now, as the gentleman, you've done your beautiful pivot, you've pivoted here. When you go forward on the right foot now to the last bit, your body turns very strongly to the right because you've got an awful lot of turn to make here. And you go up on your toes and then you collect your weight. So you have a continuation of turn there. So heel lead to start with, and then you go right up on your toe and turn around that right foot. The spin turn is a tricky step to master. It's difficult to learn in the first place as well, to get around each other, because you've got quite a lot of turn to do. But to master it's even harder, and it does take quite some time. So don't be put off by this. If you struggle with the spin turn, don't worry. It does take a long time to master it, purely because you've got an awful lot of turn to do, and you've both got important jobs here as you're doing this turn. The inside of the turn, when you're going backwards, you've got to make sure that you keep that leg in place, because obviously up to this point with the basic actions you've moved that leg, you see. So now you've got to do something different, and then you've got to turn your body past your right foot. You're actually in what we call CBMP here. As you go forward, turn the body past it, and that locking of the body against that right leg will help you to spin around that right foot as you're going up. Because at that point, the lady's out here doing a lovely bit of extension as well, you see. So it's a tricky step, but it's quite unique. It's quite out there on its own. So in the waltz and the quick step, you've got those in the corners, but don't be put off by giving them a go, but you do need lots of practice on them. If I can leave you with anything really important to take away for the spin turn, is as you go backwards, gentlemen, you leave your right leg out there for the lady to connect with, and don't take it away from the lady. If you try and do something like that and leave her behind, it's not going to work. And also, I feel like everything's moving here to the right, so everything moves to the right, and that brings my lady with me. So then I can then turn, and then once I've placed her here, I can then allow that to continue and spin past her. So it's a nice compromise here. We've got over these steps, there's an awful lot of turn, as I say. So if we do it from the beginning of that, so the first bit, the man's turning to the right, lady's on the inside, so she gets out of the way. Now the man spins and gets out of the lady's way, and then it happens again, the lady gets out of the man's way, and we spin past her. There's an awful lot to do there. So ladies, when you're moving backwards, you must make sure you get out of the man's way here on the first 3 steps. Then you've got to go past him. So you've got a bit of oomph here. You've got to give it some welly to go past him, and then keep that turn going as you get to your spinny bit, technical term, remember, write it down, at the end of the spin turn. As I say, don't be put off by it. It is tricky. It'll take you a little while to get. So in ballroom, it's important to remember the principle of turn. You've got an inside and outside always. There's always an inside and outside of turn in the ballroom when you're in contact. It's very important to remember these 2 things, because otherwise it doesn't work. You won't be able to stay together. And the beauty of the ballroom dancing is that you are moving as 2 bodies moving as one in complete harmony. Now, if one of you turns too much or not enough, then of course you'll break that beautiful visual. So it's important to identify these aspects of turn in your routines. And as I said earlier, it's happening almost every other step, especially in the waltz. You're turning, pretty much every figure has an element of turn to it, so it's constantly happening all the time. So there we go, a bit about turn. We've got it all the time. It's easier on your own, that's obviously very apparent, but to harmonise turn in the ballroom especially does take a bit of practice. So make sure you practice it. Remember all of your inside and outside of turns, and I'll catch up with you next time. Thanks for watching, see you soon. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to like it, subscribe, and click the notification bell icon down below to get all of the latest updates to Dizzyfeet TV. And while you're here, check out these videos. But remember, most importantly, to dance more and worry less.